Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Ken Colwood from clickfix.io coming at you with another Freebie Friday. And in today's Freebie Friday, we're going to be talking about a CSS trick. And actually, it is opening the door for you for a lot of additional CSS stuff that you can do to make your pages stand out. So on this page, you can see that I don't have the normal straight across horizontal line here separating the two blocks, but rather kind of the slanted look to it. And this is just something quick and easy that I just chose to do. But as you'll see in a minute here, the options are actually a lot wider than what you normally would see. And the reason for that is because we're going to be using something called Clippy, which is a simple clip path maker, and this is just CSS terms, but you can see it's very easy where you just kind of go on here and drag things around. But before we get into this, let's take a look at how the page is set up. So inside of the editor, you can see that I have a two column block here with my lovely photo here to the left as the background of the block. This is just a transparent PNG. A little bit of padding over here so it's not bumping up against the edge of the page. I do not have, as you'll see in a second here, I don't actually have the parallax set here because the built-in parallax stutters a little bit. So I'll show you a bonus CSS trick that I found makes the actual scroll silky smooth. And so that's the top block here, nothing special about that. And the bottom block, same type of deal, but instead we have the much more attractive Tomas, my business partner that many of you know and love. And so he's here on the right instead, also a transparent picture. Didn't have a big enough one to make it crisp and clear, but I'm sure we'll update that as time goes on. And again, the padding, same padding as above, but on the left side now to make sure that this doesn't bump up against the edge of that page. And again, this is just a normal background set to the right bottom. Also, again, no parallax. We're using CSS to actually make the parallax effect. All right. So the actual real magic happens inside of the custom code as usual. And what we're paying attention to first is we're going to pay attention to lines 3 through 5. And this is the angled border. All right. So this is our ClickFix shortcode for CSS. And what we've done is we've said that we want to apply the CSS directly to the block. And this block corresponds to this top block, as we can see here with our handy little identifier here. All right, so we got the top block and we got the bottom block here. We go back into the custom code and we can see that this corresponds to the top block and this is the bottom block. Now we got to get all this fancy CSS stuff over here. And the way we do that is by going over to Clippy, and Clippy, I'll drop a link to this in the description of this video. And with Clippy, all you got to do is you got to decide how you want this to look, right? And because we are working right now, we're working with essentially two blocks that are rectangles. I'm going to go with a parallelogram as my starting shape. And I know that I want that bottom edge of the rectangle to kind of slant up like this, right? So I just come here and I just say, okay, well, do I want it to be, you know, a very harsh slant that now turns it into a triangle? That could be useful for different types of designs. Or do I want it to be something that is just more gradually slanted? And for me, I chose to go with this, right? And so you can see that the value here that we would paste in is this one here. So we'll go back to the custom code and I'll show that to you, right? So this here is what we copy and pasted directly from Clippy. And what we did is in front of that, we put this dash WebKit dash clip path. Right? And all this means is that Safari and Chrome and some of the other browsers are more apt to respect the values that we put into this type of CSS identifier, if you will, or definition, I should say. And so we just throw that in there just for good measure. And all I really did is I went like this. I said, okay, this is the one directly from Clippy, so we know it is correct. And I could have put it behind. I chose to put it in front. And I just typed in dash WebKit dash, and then I copy and pasted the definition there, and that was it. And so that's the top block. And so with the top block, we know that it's going to have this kind of bottom edge. What about the second block? Well, I knew that I needed to have more or less the same kind of angle, right? But instead of it being the angle being here, which was that point over here in the bottom right corner, I actually wanted the top left corner to be what slanted down so it would match, right? And so I kind of looked at the math here and then did a little bit of playing around, and I came up with this being more or less the parallel angle that the bottom block or the second block would need to have in order to match up with the first. And so I went ahead and just did exactly what I did with the first one. I copy and pasted the clip path in here, and then I made this copy of it with the WebKit definition in front of it, and that was it for there. Now, this part, this margin top minus 15 VH, let me go ahead and take it off, and I'll show you exactly what that does. All right, let's go ahead and reload the page. So you can see that if we don't move anything, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It makes this bottom left to bottom right angle up, and it makes the top left and top right of the second block angle down. But because these are now clipped, if you will, it now shows a blank, right? So it's as if there's no content in there. So what the top margin does is it moves this block, this lower block, up so it meets the block above it. And what we did is we said, okay, we experiment. This was just experimentation, so this is just something that you just kind of have to play around with. What we said is we want the margin top of that second block to be minus 15 of the vertical height. So this VH CSS definition, what it does is it calculates the total vertical height depending on the screen that you're using, and it goes ahead and it breaks those up into units, and so you can use those units to move things around in a similar way to doing percentage or pixels or anything like that. It's just another unit that you have at your disposal that lends itself very well for responsive design. Okay. And when I add that in, and I click on Publish, we're going to see that all it's done is it's reduced this space between the blocks, so that way it looks like it all flows into one, right? And because the parallax is there and the images themselves are stationary, well, you can see that it has a nice little effect on the page. Right? And so how do we get that stable parallax? And maybe I'm the only one that's had a little bit of a jitter on the built-in effect, but I've seen it on several pages, so I went about looking for how to get around that. And what I came up with is that what we're going to do is we're going to apply some CSS, and this block style opt border is simply, if we inspect the page here, is where Ontraport is defining what the background is. So we have to apply the CSS directly to this actual element. And so we just went ahead and defined, it's in this block, and then it's this class that we're targeting. And we did that like so. So it's the same as you saw above. But instead of targeting the block, we're actually targeting this specific class. And then we go ahead and we just say background attachment is fixed, and we override everything by saying important. And then this background size, this has to do with adjusting the size of our pictures. So if in a normal situation, you wouldn't even bother to deal with background size, you would just have this background attachment fixed important here. and that'll make sure that the parallax, the fixed parallax effect is there, but it's very smooth. So that's it, guys. It took me longer to explain it than it takes to do it. So now there's no excuse for you to not get into something like Clippy and start experimenting with what's possible with CSS now that you have a simple way to apply this. Now, other ideas that you could potentially use Clippy for is creating things that are a little bit outside the norm, right? So normally we see people's pictures as circles, for example, right? Or inside of a circle kind of frame. But there's no reason not to start getting fancy and, making different shapes, right? Because all these different clipping masks can be very useful if you have a little bit of imagination. And instead of applying it to the block, we have the option for you to apply things directly to elements, right? So it's CSS element. So you could take a picture and apply these types of clipping masks to the picture. And so you could imagine, seeing, taking a background and having it show up inside of a star instead, just like you're seeing here. Or maybe your picture or the pictures of your clients for the testimonials are kind of more in this star shape, if you're kind of going for a Hollywood feel. And you can also do the same type of deal to add any type of CSS to columns as well. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop them in the comments below or reach out to me directly, or you can always visit our documentation at doc.clickfix.io to see more of what's possible. Or you can check out the YouTube channel for a lot more how-to videos and overviews on what's possible. And then, of course, you could always visit this page here, which I'll also drop a link to. Click on this Consultant Expert, and then you can schedule a call with one of us to go over your particular use case and figure out exactly if and how ClickFix can increase your bottom line, save you some money on your tech stack, or just generally make your life easier.